Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN. NordVPN provides over 5,000 super-fast servers across 60 different countries to help you to hide your IP, location and internet activity, whether you're at home or in a public place like a coffee shop or airport. Simply click on the country you'd like to connect to. There are also a range of specialized servers for peer-to-peer, there's a dedicated IP option, and double VPN for when you want to be one step closer to being behind 7 proxies. There's also a kill switch option if you wanted to cut off your internet should the VPN stop for whatever reason. NordVPN also works in China and with Netflix. You can have up to 6 simultaneous connections at once, and it comes with 24-hour customer support. NordVPN stores no data logs. At the moment they're 70% off, making it just $3.49 a month, plus you get an additional free month by using the link in the video's description. The theme of my uploads may look like an eclectic mess of whatever ideas came to me in the shower that morning, and sometimes that is the case, but there are usually several reasons for why I choose to make the things that I do. Some examples. This, a video talking about player visibility, is always relevant because it's something everybody cares about, whether they're playing or viewing the game. It also finally gave me a good reason to cover the game filters features for a gameplay related reason, and it gave me another chance to moan about Valve's approach to custom player models. Though since it seems like the community doesn't mind as much as I do, I think I'm just about done with that now. This one covered a recent update, while also bridging the upload gap that would inevitably happen as I took time to work with 2kliksphilip on Half-Life Alyx related content over on his channel. Since the stuff he was working on was quite directly relevant to this video's theme, I had no problem in recommending people checked him out, as it may also be of interest to 3kliksphilip viewers. This Source SDK video finally covered something I got a lot of messages asking me about, so answering this in video form will save me time in the long run. And it primes people for more Source SDK related content. Oh look, Source SDK related content. Making defenestration was a reason to finally use the service that I bought, configured and then sort of forgot about a few months ago, as well as being an excuse to make the map of my dreams, protected from scrutiny by the veil that is April Fools. And this video about buying WinRAR was actually... it was just about buying WinRAR. So you see, there are usually several good reasons for me making the stuff that I make. So what made me port the maps from the oldest version of Counter-Strike, 1.6, to CSGO? Well, that alone is pretty cool, but what finally got me to port these maps was Counter-Strike Classic Offensive. This is a mod that's been in the works for years. It intends to combine the best bits of older Counter-Strike with the best bits of Global Offensive. It's coming along nicely. It's got custom weapon skins, character models, sounds, satisfying ragdolls, a lovingly recreated version of the original Inferno, but right now, that's the only map for it. This mod currently has just one map. What a shame it is for such a good mod's gameplay to be limited to just that. So I thought I'd bring a few more classics to Global Offensive to serve as stopgaps, at least until the mod produces its own remade versions of them. On to the process. How to port old maps to CSGO. Part 1. Importing the map file. Getting the map to work in CSGO isn't as easy as simply dropping the map file into the CSGO folder. A lot has changed since the original Counter-Strike, which is more like a modified version of Quake 2 than it is Source. It has its own file types and everything. I won't bore you with the details, but this is all you need to know if you want to attempt it for yourself. What I will share with you is all the ways in which it went wrong for me, because it's much more amusing. On my first attempt, I didn't use WinBSPC, but instead used BSP Viewer, and this led to a horrible problem. It made every surface hollow, merely 6 sides and a space in the middle. This doesn't sound like much of a problem, but it really is, as it violates every rule of how a map should be made. That's like, imagine if your house and everything inside it was an inch thick and hollow on the inside, and how broken that would be. Now imagine it being done to you too. That's how broken this map is in this sort of state. Without getting too technical, this breaks everything, as well as doing weird things with the wall banging. If there's any way you could get away with this kind of mess, it would be with a simple map made 20 years ago, but even then, it felt like too much of a compromise, even if I could somehow get it working. Switching from BSP Viewer to WinBSPC yielded much better results. This didn't make everything hollow. In fact, it did the opposite by carving the whole map out of a solid block, which sounds horrendous, but the result is at least usable, provided you take the time to tidy it up. The problems aren't quite as game-breaking. In some spots it would flip the textures, which is okay, it's just a visual problem. And where this happens, either you notice it and you fix it, or you don't notice it, in which case, is it even a problem? One place you will quickly notice this is when it's done on doorways, because both sides of an arch showed the same picture. So this required me flying about the level to find situations where this had happened, then flipping them back and realigning them to the door frames manually. Problem solved. The other amusing bug this generates is in situations like this, when a crate is touching a wall. It doesn't understand what a crate is, nor what a wall is, and more often than not results in a hole in the wall with the crate extending all the way through it. Sometimes boring all the way through the nearest mountainside, or extending deep into the ground. Again, I work with the attitude of if I notice it, I'll fix it, and if I don't notice it, I'll hope that nobody else does either. The worst you'll get will be some weird wall bangs where one way to shoot through a concrete wall will be to shoot through a touching wooden crate. It isn't exactly game breaking. If this botched approach to map making sounds amateurish, good. It is. To port a map, you require a certain level of mapping knowledge, but it's more about patience, stubbornness, and possessing unhealthy amounts of willpower. You've got to remember that when you started, you had nothing. Then you can quickly get it up to a working state. You'll never make it perfect, but the more time you invest into it, the closer you'll get, with rapidly diminishing returns. It could be that there's an elegant solution to these problems somewhere out there. Maybe if I used several programs in a certain combination and with specific settings, then I could bypass these problems completely. I definitely did a bit of experimenting before I started in the hope I'd find a miracle solution, but what I'm looking for might not even exist. Or even if it did, maybe it would take so long to discover how to do it that I'd still have been better off with the brute force approach instead. Fun fact, maps in CS 1.6 didn't have models. Everything was instead built out of blocks by the mapper. Every time you saw a car or table, the mapper had to build that all piece by piece. These days you can just plonk in a high quality model into your map that a 3D modeler has made. Textures. Although everything I've shown to you so far looks like it's textured, this isn't how it starts off. When you first port a map, it looks white because none of the textures from the old Counter-Strike are available in the new one. So I had to port all of them as well. I am more certain that there is a miracle solution for porting these to source, but again I didn't find it and instead resorted to brute force. I started by making a master folder with all of the thousands of textures found in Counter-Strike and Half-Life. Why Half-Life? Because, with Counter-Strike being a mod for that game, many maps back then used textures from the base game instead. I'm pretty sure that all of Nuke's textures are from Half-Life. When looking around the ported maps, for each missing texture I found, I searched that master folder for its name, then converted it into a texture for CSGO. Don't worry, in the old days maps only had like 30 or 40 different textures, so we're only talking about half an hour to do this. And it was really satisfying too. I identified a common texture I needed, like the cliffs, ported it across, and suddenly the map updated to show them all, and it felt like I was making proper progress. After about a dozen textures, most of the map looked textured, and then it's a case of hunting around for the last few, probably hidden on cabinets or light switches and so on. But simply porting the textures is not good enough. The game won't know that something's made of metal until you add the word metal into its properties. I think by default, everything's made of a generic kind of rocky substance, and it can be hard to judge what a material should be made from simply from what it looks like. It's much easier to see how the mapper used it in the level and to decide for yourself what kind of sound and bullet hole it should make when it's shot. The other thing porting doesn't do automatically is transparency. In 1.6, transparent textures had a weird symbol in the name and a blue background, two things that don't work well in CSGO, so I had to Photoshop the blue out of these. But nothing's ever simple, is it? And the blue would sometimes bleed into the texture itself, so I had to adjust the colour levels to neutralise this. How well this worked depended on the texture, so again it was a painstaking effort of doing it until it looked right. There are even different ways of making things look transparent. This is using transparency, but if I change that word to alpha test, that looks better. At least, in my opinion. Fun fact, repeating textures occur when the same texture is applied across a large area. To hide this, CS 1.6 had a texture randomizer. It would vary between several similar images to make stuff like this rust pattern not appear to repeat so obviously. This is something that Source doesn't do, or at least not in the same way. These days we have two different textures and paint between them, which leads to a similar result but requires a bit of extra work by the mapper. But because it's done differently these days, it was too much hassle to try and faithfully recreate the texture pattern seen in Nuke. I could have done it, but couldn't be bothered. And had I not told you about this, you wouldn't have noticed anyway. The conversion process can break other bits of the map as well. This is down to how different game engines do these things. So a bit like with getting the textures to look right, this is fixed by running about the map for hours and hours, shooting at things, jumping on things, and by trying to break the level in ways that only gamers know how. I'm sad to say that the original sounds didn't survive the port to CSGO. But early on, I decided just to keep the maps silent instead, and to let doors and stuff use default CSGO sounds. But maybe I should add back the bark at Pop Dog. Not so fun fact, one thing I will never get completely right is the scale of the level. Player models were shorter back in 1.6. They could fully hide behind a 64 unit high crate, but in CSGO, while your view might be at 64 units above the ground, your player model can extend up as far as 72, meaning you could be visible from the other side, even if you can't see over. These larger player models have all kinds of repercussions. You can get stuck on ladders, vents and so on, not because the ported map is wrong, but because it's right. But to get the gameplay to be the same as it was originally would involve stretching and skewing the map so that it's no longer the original anymore. Valve, please fix. It's something the guys working on the CS:GO mod have put a lot of thought into when it comes to remaking the original levels, but for these level ports, I'm just going to keep them as they were originally, because I suspect it's one of those problems that only grows as you try to solve it. And last, the lighting. All versions of Counter-Strike do the lighting in the same way, pretty much by ray tracing the whole thing when you're making the level, and then to store the results in the map file. This means the lighting generally looks quite pretty, but doesn't change if the map changes in some way, like if a ceiling is blown up or a door opened. That being said, CSGO's lighting is much better than 1.6's. I guess in the time between these games, PCs had gotten faster, and so were able to do more accurate lighting simulations. But as a result, the lighting in these levels in CSGO looks completely different, even if I use the original lights. The colours and brightness have changed beyond all recognition, and the result looks horrible. So as the person porting these maps, I had a difficult decision to make. Do I spend lots of time trying to make the lighting look as bad as it did in the original, or do I embrace the improved lighting in CSGO to make the maps look prettier? And I chose the second option, to do what I thought looked best, while sticking loosely to the styles and colours found in the original. It seems a shame to go to such efforts to recreate an original map, only to do my own thing when it comes to the lighting, but really, you can make maps look so much better in Source than is possible to do in CS 1.6. Large areas bathed in blood red are so 1998, and dark corners may look cool, but are unacceptable in this modern, competitive age where visibility comes before anything else apart from custom skins. Oops. So yeah, I kept the original layouts and textures, but made these maps' lighting prettier and brighter. The conversion isn't perfect, but it's close enough that most people won't care, and I hope that now I've done this, others will also attempt it, and hopefully to a better standard now I've provided this handy step-by-step guide on how to do it, which might be another one of this video's purposes. For me, doing this has taught me a lot about the earliest Counter-Strike maps, and I've enjoyed the challenge. The first map you port is a daunting task, but once you've got one under your belt, you're much better prepared for the next. And while that still won't be easy, you at least have some experience to fall back on, and the knowledge that it is possible to do.